In this video session, I want to demonstrate how you can create an interactive branching scenario using PowerPoint. Now, when we talk about stories in general, like the kind of books that you read, most of those are very linear in nature. For example, we start on page 1, you move to page 2, and so forth on to page 989. But it's a very passive engagement. There's really no interaction. You're simply reading what has taken place. You're reading about characters and so forth. To be honest, a lot of those books are very entertaining, but unfortunately those same authors like Stephen King, Michael Crichton, those guys don't write our textbooks. And so what I want to show you is a different way of looking at creating a scenario or a case study for your students that isn't linear in nature. Something that's a little bit more like the 1980s. I'm not talking about spandex, big hair, or those synthesizer sounds. Rather, I'm talking about those really cool books from the 1980s called Choose Your Own Adventure. And inside these books, you were the main character, and at certain points, you had to make critical decisions. And based on your decision, the story would continue. However, what happened in the story from that point on pertained to the decision that you made. Every decision could either lead to greater possibilities, or it could also lead to an untimely death. So each one of these books, and there were several of them, but each one of these books had this really neat aspect to it that you could always come back, and basically even with the same book, you could have multiple stories within inside of it. Each time you read it, it could be a different experience based upon the decisions that you made. Let me give you an example. So let's say in these Choose Your Own Adventures, you would always have your start, your introduction. It would get you going. But at some point, you are going to have to make a decision. So let's say that you're inside of a pyramid and you happen to be given 3 options here, as represented by this diamond shape. You can either go down the left hallway, you can go straight, or you can go right. Well, if we go down the left hallway, we find that we're presented with another decision. It's a treasure room. Well, should we leave the treasure alone or should we take it? And obviously you can see what happens based upon that decision. If you leave the treasure alone, you don't touch it, the pyramid's happy with you and you have a happy ending. If you take the treasure, however, you are cursed with the same age as Willard Scott. Now, what if we went back and instead we had gone to the right? Well, if you go to the right, you find a room of skeletons who have a bone to pick. And actually, since you have so many bones, they decide to pick yours. Well, what happens if we go straight? Well, if we go straight, we're offered another decision. It seems the mummy has left his purse. So what do? If we return the purse, or do we take it? If you return the purse, happy ending. Maybe he'll actually give you a reward. However, if you decide to take the purse, you're presented with another challenge, another decision. Do I escape through the window? Not that pyramids have them. Or do I go down on the door on the right? Well, if you escape through the window, you obviously escape to a happy ending. If you choose the door on the right, you're back inside the room of skeletons. And so this particular story, this one book, if this were as long as it was, it'll actually have 4 different endings that you could possibly choose from. And so that was the kind of neat thing about these Choose Your Own Adventure books. And what's really cool is that we can take this exact same idea and apply it to case studies. Instead of a student just reading a case study and say, here's the case study, here's what happened, what would you do at the end? Instead, we can actually rebuild it and have students make decisions through the process. Well, after you see this type of evidence, which of these decisions would you make? And then based upon that decision, it could lead to a different outcome. This idea of branching can create a little bit more of an interactive, more engaging possibility with some of your content. In this particular session, what we're going to do is we're actually going to build a small-scale branching scenario that I've gone to the work of putting together for you. We're just going to fill in the gaps. But let me kind of show you what we'll be doing with that. We're going to be taking on the role of a detective solving Lincoln's murder. Whenever we're mapping this thing out, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a start, because every place has to have a beginning. After we start, basically the title slide, we are then going to introduce. This might be a paragraph to help sort of the students get into that character mode, who they are, where they're at, that sort of thing, helping set up the context for what's going to go on. Then we're going to have them read a letter, because in the intro they discover, wait a minute, I've got a letter from the Secretary of War. I wonder what this is about. So they open the letter, and the letter basically says, Lincoln's been assassinated, we need as many detectives as we can, attaches an interview list. When the student progresses on, he actually comes to the interview list, and as you can see represented by the diamond, he has decisions to make. Now, in this particular one, this is a very simple one. It is not a very complex adventure, which you'll see here in just a moment. But inside these interviews, he has 8 decisions that he can take a look at, 8 interviews that he can read about or discuss with. And we're not going to go through and list all these. I just want you to see that there's 8 of them. And at any point after he reads one interview, he can go back to the interview list. Or he can actually decide to report to Secretary of War Edward Stanton. Now, keep in mind that it's whenever they read an interview, the idea is to get all the information they need to solve this crime from these 8 interviews. No one particular interview is going to give you all the answers, so they have to read all 8. But at any given time, when the person feels like, you know what, I think I have enough information, they can report to Stanton. Or if they feel like they need more information, they can always go back to the interviews. Once they go to Stanton, they're given 3 choices. They can either decide to name the murderer, they can pick out the murderer's photo from a lineup, or they can talk about the crime scene. These are the 3 things that we're really looking for to make sure the student understands. Here we have 4 choices. We have David Harold, George Azerodt, Lewis Powell, and of course John Wilkes Booth. Now, these are the ones presented. And you'll notice, though, that of these options, we really don't have a choice if we choose David Harold, George Azerodt, or Lewis Powell. If the user picks one of these, of course these are the wrong names, they get sent back to the interview list. So they have to come all the way back and reread the interviews to find the correct name. Now, if they happen to choose Booth, Edward Stanton goes, congratulations, this is the name we've probably been looking for. If you're ready, you can move on to the next phase, which is picking out the photo, or you can go back to the interviews to get the information you need before coming back to the photo. So if the user decides to go on to the photo, we have pretty much the same thing. We have 4 pictures that they have to choose from. The Secretary of War Stanton says, you know, we really got to get these wanted posters out. We need you to, based upon your interview, upon your research, which one of these is the correct one. So they have to choose. If they happen to choose David Harold, George Azerodt, if I'm even probably butchering his name, or Lewis Powell, those are incorrect. Those don't go anywhere except back to the interview list. The Secretary of War says, you know what, this isn't right. You need to go back and do your research again. So they go back to the interview list, read the interviews, report back to Stanton, then they can come back to the photo. Now, if they choose Booth, again, they're presented with the same thing. Great job. Out of curiosity, are you able to tell us what happened inside the crime scene? If they say yes, they can move on to the crime scene. If they choose not to, they can go back to the interviews to research what the interviews or what the eyewitnesses saw to basically put the scene back together before coming back to the crime scene. If they decide to go into the crime scene, here we have 4 options. We have 3 of them that go back to the interview list, which basically said you did not get it correct, go back and look at it again. Or, if they do happen to get it correct, Secretary of War is very pleased and basically tells you, listen, I need you to put all this stuff together into a report and send it to the Vice President. Of course, this one is set up to where you actually send an email, even though the Vice President didn't have email in the 1800s, but oh well. You can basically see the role of laying it out of a branching story. By and far, this is a very limited one, not nearly as expansive as you might have, but I don't teach anything creative wise, so this is all I got. But anyway, hopefully you kind of see how it's laid out from the beginning to the end, and you see all the decisions being made in between. Let's go and take a look then inside of our PowerPoint. Now, once we get into our PowerPoint, all that we really need to do is we need to start building the content. We can go through and start adding the text. We know that, okay, this is the intro. I'm setting up the stage here. In this particular slide, I am going through, and this is the letter to all the detectives. In the following slide, this will be the interview list. We start typing in all the text all the way through however many number of slides that we need. And you can always refer back to your flowchart to sort of get that idea. And I believe if we look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 8, that's 12. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. I need 28 slides of information. Remember, it's not just your basic ones, it's also for every decision page, where those decisions going to go? Well, you can see based on this one, I have 8 pages that the user needs to be able to get to. And so altogether, I have 28 slides that I need to implement. In PowerPoint, I would go through and create all those 28 slides and put the text that I need. Now, keep in mind that we could just work with the basic text, and that would work, but it's really not that exciting to sort of look at. What I'm going to show you is this version that I created. It has all the same text information. The only thing I did different was I simply added in a few more photos. I created a custom title slide, which you can do. It doesn't have to be this fancy, or if you do want something this fancy, just let me know. And then on each page after that, I simply put all my text on this kind of interesting looking paper background. So it was kind of cool. All I did was simply try to find a new way to dress it up. Keep in mind that everything I'm about to show you, it utilizes almost all the things inside PowerPoint, with the exception of those custom graphics. We've got 28 slides that we need to do. We've got all of our text, and I've gone through and I've changed the text to a typewriter font, because as a detective, you think those detective stories, typewriter, and everything else. Oh, and while I'm thinking about whenever you're choosing a font, the most important thing to think about is if you're going to be delivering this as a PowerPoint to students, you have to make sure that they have the same font that you used. For example, if you happen to open up the workshop file that you downloaded, you would notice that what you have doesn't look like what my screen shows, and that's because this is a custom font. Because I have a custom font and didn't give it to you, yours is going to end up defaulting. And whenever you're developing this, make sure that you use a font that everyone's going to have. And if you're not downloading a lot of custom fonts like I do for a lot of the different work that I design, then you shouldn't really have to worry about it. This particular one is Courier, and almost every machine's going to have it. Every machine's probably going to have Arial, Times New Roman, and so forth. So look for a font, though, that's a standard font on your machine. All right, here's what's taking place in slide number 1. We have the title slide. This is our intro that we've talked about. And then, of course, we have our letter and then our interview list. Now, one of the things I want to point out, though, is that, I know what these are, but when it comes to working with PowerPoint, you have to make sure to go through and actually title your slides. Let's go into our outline mode. We're going to click on that tab. And you'll notice, though, I've already given these slides all a title. And if you'll notice, they're actually unique. We have the main title. We have a start here, or that might be our intro. Then we have the letter, and we're missing one right here, which we'll go back and fill in. And you'll notice, though, that each one of these have their own unique name. Even this one where it says murderer's name, then we go through and actually give the name of each one, each of these slides. And there's a reason for this, and I'm going to show you that here in just a second. But what you need to know is every single slide must have a unique name. It's extremely important to remember that, especially when we start linking everything together. So I'm going to come up here to slide 4 because it's missing a title, and we're going to put one in. According to the slide, this looks like it is my interview list. So I'm going to title this. I'm going to click right next to that slide. I'm going to title it Interview List. Now I'm going to come down where my other gap is to slide number 13, and this looks like my report to Stanton. I'm going to click next to that slide and type in Report to Stanton. There is no reason to hit return, because if you do hit return, you end up putting in a blank slide. And if you do that, just hit the backspace and it will be deleted. And it looks like I've got one more gap. Here we go. Slide number 19. This looks like we need to put up wanted posters, choose the photo. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this one simple. I'm going to call this one Photos. Okay. So now all my slides have a title. And here's why this is important. Let's go and click on the interview list. And you'll notice I have links already set up except for these top 3. So let's go ahead and link these to other slides. And this is really the key part to creating a branching story. Most of the times whenever you create a PowerPoint presentation, it's very linear. Slide 1 goes to slide 2. You simply hit the arrow key to move to the next slide inside your presentation. But what's really cool about PowerPoint is that you can actually create hyperlinks to any slide in your presentation. It does not have to be a linear presentation. It can be very non-linear, kind of like a web page. For example, on slide number 4, it says right here that we should be able to click on any of the interviewees to see what they have to say. Let's go ahead and highlight Mary Jane Anderson, and we're going to go to our Insert tab, and I'm going to click on the hyperlink. Now, you'll notice right here, I have some options. It says, do you want to link it to the existing file or a web page? Nope. I want to link it to a place in this document. Now, this is why all those individual titles are very important. Can you imagine if all this said was slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, slide 4, slide... You wouldn't have any clue as to which slide had the information that you need, unless you were looking at the preview. But because I title it, it's a lot easier for me to see. So I'm going to click on Mary Jane because that's where it's going. I'm going to hit OK. Then I'm going to highlight Joseph Stewart, insert a hyperlink, place in this document, and I'm going to choose his name. And I'm going to do the same thing for James Ferguson. Hyperlink, place in this document, and James Ferguson. Okay. So now it doesn't matter what order the slide is in, because now when I click on the name, it's going to automatically jump to that slide, sort of creating this mock illusion of interactivity. One of the things I do want to mention, whenever you do create a slide, by default, let me go back here, and this is which one, the interview list? The interview list, okay. By default, whenever you enter in a slide, a title, the title will typically appear right in the middle of the slide. It'll sit on top of whatever text or images that you have right there. You don't want that for your viewer. If you've entered in a title and it shows up on your slide like this, there's a way to hide it. You can't delete it, because if we delete it, here's what happens. If I delete the title, go back to my outline, look what happened. It's disappeared. So let me put interview back in, and let me show you how to hide it. Simply select it by clicking on the text, and you'll notice there are dotted outlines around the text. That's your text box. You want to select those edges. Do not select these dots. Select the edge of the text box and simply move it off the slide. If it's not on the slide, it won't be seen, but the nice thing is, look, it still keeps your title in place. All these have the exact same thing. If we select any slide and you scroll up, that's the title of the slide. I'm going back to my interview list. So we've entered the interviews. We've entered in the hyperlinks to go to those specific places inside the document. So now let's go to slide 5. In slide 5, once you read about Mary Jane Anderson, this is her account of what she saw take place. Oh, and by the way, since we're talking about using PowerPoint, one of the cool things you can do is, if you don't want to do text, or in addition to your text, you can always record narration. You can actually come up here to your slideshow and do a recorded narration, I believe. Record slideshow, no. Yeah, actually, oh no, I'm sorry, that's it. Yeah, record slideshow, and you can actually do a narration. So if you want to add your own voice to go in addition to this, it'd be kind of a neat touch. Or if you want to record it separate, then input the audio file into it. You can do the same thing there. If you don't want text, you can also do a short video, which would be really kind of cool, but at the same time, it will really add to your file size. So remember, all we're really using are the tools already inside PowerPoint. Let's go over here, because now we have two options. This is a decision tree. Once they get done at the end of the letter, they have an option to either continue with the interview or to report to Stanton. Let's highlight the continue interviews, because just like a web link, we need to do a hyperlink to somewhere inside of our PowerPoint slide. So with it highlighted, we're going to click on the Insert tab, click on Hyperlink, and we're going to find the right page that it needs to link to, the right slide that it should go to. And it's called Interviews, so I'm going to click that and hit OK. And Report to Stanton, I'm going to highlight that, insert a hyperlink, make sure it's going to a place in this document, and then simply find the slide that I titled Report to Stanton. Remember, all those unique names really do help out. So I'm going to hit OK. When the user gets down here, they have two decisions. They can either click on this and continue with the interviews by going back to the interview slide, or they can click on this and jump ahead by reporting to Stanton. That's really the key to creating all these interactive branching stories inside PowerPoint, is simply creating slides with titles and then linking to those titles. That way the user isn't clicking on the next button to proceed through your presentation. They can jump anywhere they want to inside of it. Now I'm going to go ahead and highlight these two, and you'll see why here in just a second. So I've highlighted those two, and I've pressed Control-C on my keyboard, which is the default for Control-Copy. I'm basically copying these two links. I'm going to go to my next one with Joseph Stewart, and you see these? I'm going to go ahead and paste over these with the two that I did. You say, well, why would you do that? Well, keep in mind that this interview is going to the exact same slide. Stanton's going to the exact same slide. So why would I want to go through the process of highlighting each one, inserting a hyperlink, selecting interview, then selecting this one, inserting a hyperlink, then selecting Stanton? When technically, if I copy and paste it, you know what the beauty of it is that it's keeping those links with it. I'm copying and pasting a hyperlink. So these are the exact same, so since they're going to the same place, I'm going to copy these, and I'm going to click on my other slide, James Ferguson. I think this is slide number 7. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm simply going to paste it. Now, if each one of these went to a completely different page than all the others, then yeah, you wouldn't necessarily do this. But because at the end of every interview, you have two of the same options, either go back to the interview list or report to Stanton, we can simply copy and paste those hyperlinks into place. And to kind of show you what this does, let me go back to the top real quick and to show you. And we're going to view this from the beginning. Click on here. All right, so arriving early to work, you notice an envelope from the Secretary of War. It says to click on the envelope from the Secretary. So we do. It opens up and it says, to all available detectives, we need your help. These are 3 things we're looking for: the name of the suspect, what he looks like, and what happened in the president's box. Click the envelope to see the list of interviewees. And this is the part that we went ahead and set up. So here's our list of interviews, and we did Mary Jane Anderson, so we're going to click on her name, and it takes us to the Mary Jane Anderson slide. And at the bottom, we can either report to Stanton or continue with the interviews. Let's go back to the interviews. Let's click on a different name that's further down in the list. Let's do one right in the middle. We'll do Lydia Charleston. All right, so Lydia Charleston, we can either go back to the interviews or report to Stanton. So if the user feels like they have enough information, they can click on report to Stanton, and it goes straight to his slide. And we can kind of continue from there. So I'm going to hit escape. Basically what we did, we're testing our links to make sure they're going to the right places. So now that we're at this particular one, notice though we have 2 links here. You know the murderer's name, and you can recreate the crime scene. But what we don't have linked up is the photo. So we need to go ahead and create that hyperlink. First off, we want to make sure inside of our outline we actually have that slide titled, and we do. So good, because that'll make it a lot easier. So let's simply highlight this, and we're going to insert, click on the insert tab, click on the hyperlink, and we're going to click on, let's see, we're looking for the photo, murder's photo. So we're going to click on number 19, and we're going to hit OK. Now it has its own hyperlink. And whenever we click on the murderer's name, it's going to link to the murderer's name over here, slide number 14. When we click on this one, this hyperlink is actually going to take us to photos, which is slide 19. When we click on Sir, I can recreate the crime scene, this is actually going to take us to slide 24. So you can see from this one slide, we can actually jump to 3 different parts of our presentation. Kind of cool. All right, so let's go ahead to the next slide. Since we're dealing with, we're dealing with the photos. So I'm clicking on the photo slide, which brings us here. And I think on this one, let me see, are any of these hyperlinked? And you can always tell if it's hyperlinked by clicking on it, right-clicking it, and you'll notice where it says, good. You can edit the hyperlink, so if you've messed up, you can always go back and redo it. You can also remove a hyperlink. So I'm just checking to see if these have a hyperlink, which they do. Let's see if this one does. And this one doesn't. All right, so we want to go and create a hyperlink for that one. And neither does this one. So it looks like Lewis Powell and John Wilkes Booth, we need to link both of these to the correct places. So let's go and select Lewis Powell's photo, insert, hyperlink. So now, since we're on the photo section, we need to link him to the murderer's photo, and this is Lewis Powell. So I'm going to select that and hit OK. I'm going to select Booth now, and I'm going to do an insert tab. There's the insert tab. I'm going to click on hyperlink. I'm going to go to a place in this document, and because we're dealing with the photos, I've got murderer's photo, and I've properly labeled them ahead of time, Booth. So I'm going to do that and hit OK. So now, basically, each one of these should link to, and let's go and test it just to make sure. All right, so I'm going to go up to slideshow, and I'm going to view it from the current slide. All right, so we've got, this should go to George Azerodt, and this one was Lewis Powell. So let's click on Lewis Powell. You pick the second photo. It appears the photo you have chosen. Lewis Powell. Very good. So that's how we, that's how we knew what to title the slide based upon the text inside of it. Okay. Let's get out of here. And we wanted to check Booth too. So I'm going to go back to the photos, and I'm going to do slideshow, view from current slide, and we want to make sure it works. So now let's click on Booth. You pick the photo on the far right, fantastic work, detective. This looks like it's the correct one. Although I didn't put his name in there, it is the correct one. Very good. So I'm going to escape out of there. Now let's do something else on this photo. And so we've kind of showed you how to create the hyperlink so that you can basically go anywhere inside your document. I mean, it's really that easy. Just make sure you have proper titles for each of your slides. That's really the key. As long as you got a good title and you can pick on it. Everything else is just simply highlighting and inserting a hyperlink to those specific slides. But now we want to do something kind of cool. Again, using PowerPoint. I want these photos to slide in. In other words, when it says we need to put up wanted posters but don't know which of these photos to use, please click here to see the photos. Whenever the user clicks there, I want these photos to slide in. So I'm going to select all the photos. I'm just holding down the Shift key and selecting each one. I'm going to go into Animations, and I want these to fly in. So I'm going to click Fly In. And that's as simple, that's really all you have to do. And so if I go to my animation pane, I'm going to click on that. Okay, oh, let me slide this out. So according to this, whenever I click the mouse, all these photos are going to come in at the same time. And the reason it's set up that way is because I had them all selected at once when I applied that one animation. Whenever you have multiple items selected and you click on any animation, automatically applies it to all. Now, if you want these to slide in one at a time, then, for example, I would select picture number 10, and I would do Start After Previous. I could select this one to do Start After Previous, and you'll notice, see what's happening with the timeline? Each one is taking place after the other. So it initially happens with the click, which is what we want because it tells the user to click here to see the photos. Then once the user clicks, each photo will come in one at a time. Now, if you want to rearrange the order of these, simply select them and move them around by clicking and dragging them to new positions. So kind of cool. Just a small way that you can add those extra things of animation to it to make it a little bit more engaging other than just a static image. If you want to add a sound, you could also select, you could click on any of them, go to Effect Options, and then where it says Sound for underneath enhancements, you could simply pick any of the sounds available, and it'll add it to it whenever it slides in. So kind of cool. Just some small things that you can do to add those extra elements of interactivity. Well, not necessarily interactivity, but a little bit more engaging. Things moving other than just being static. All right, so we've added our photos. We've got them sliding in, which is fantastic. And whenever the user clicks on any of them, they're going to go to the correct place. So let's go and find Lewis Powell's area, and we want to edit his page. That's Booth. We'll come back to Booth. I'm just clicking on these, going through. I guess I could go to the outline. Wouldn't that be a lot faster? There we go. We want to work on Powell, so I'm selecting his slide, which is right here. All right, good. All right, so in this particular one, it says you pick the second photo. What I want to happen, instead of just the text popping up, I want this to actually look like it's going into the envelope. That way the user feels like, you know, hey, I've made this action. I want to see it take place. Because right now, whenever they come to the slide, it just simply pops up. So what we want to do is we're going to select this image, and I'm going to go up here to Add Animation. I'm going to drop down to Custom Path. And with Custom Path, I can click and draw the path I want the image to follow. And I'm going to double click at the end to close it off. So it looks like the image will go up and then go right into the envelope. Now notice though it still stays on top of the envelope, so we're just going to add another animation to it while it's still selected, and we're going to have it disappear. Okay. All right, so now you'll notice over here we have two animations taking place. You play through, disappears. You'll notice though, see that little mouse in front of each one? This means the user actually has to click on it in order for those animations to take place. Well, the user's not going to know to do that. There's nothing in here that says click to put the photo into the envelope. Click to make it disappear. We don't want the user to do that. We simply want it to happen. So what do? Well, let's go and select the second one, and we're going to basically tell it to come to start after the previous one. So once it goes through, then it'll just simply disappear. We won't have to do anything. But what about this one, the click, to put it inside the envelope? Well, we could add that text in there if we want to, or we could just have it do it automatically after we jump to this slide. Well, how do we do that? Well, this is a small thing that most folks don't realize, is that every time that you go to a new slide, basically there's some type of transition. And a transition is a type of animation. Even if you have no transition, it still registers as a type of animation. So if you'll notice, we'll select this top one that says it's waiting on a click to do something. We're going to come over here and we're going to tell it to start after the previous. Well, what is the previous animation? The previous animation is the transition. Even if you don't have anything fancy selected, the minute you jump to a slide, that's considered animation. So now when the user comes here, it's going to automatically, the picture is going to automatically start moving into the envelope. Let me show you. So let's go back to our photos. I'm going to go to slideshow. I'm going to do it from current slide. We need to put up wanted posters. Click here to see the photos. I'm going to click. Photos come in. Now I need to pick the photo. Well, this is the one that we're using. So let's pick on Lewis Powell. We're going to choose him. Look at that. See, it automatically did it after we clicked on it because we jumped to that new slide. But what if we don't want it to move automatically? What if we want it to be delayed? Well, select the photo because that's the one that has the animation tied to it. Oops, don't move it. Select the photo, go back into your animation, and I want you to, your animation tab, make sure the animation pane is open, which it should be. Click on that first one, select it, and I want you to notice right up here, see where it says delay? You can delay how long it should start. Let's put it on 2 seconds. That way the user will actually start reading you pick the second photo before it takes place. So let's see what happens now. So let's go back to our photos and let's do slideshow from current slide. Click here to see the photo. Select Lewis Powell. You pick the second photo. Oh, look at that. So now you've given the user time to start reading the text up at the top and then the animation just automatically happens. Pretty cool. So let's escape out of there. Now, what happens if I want this text to fade in after the photo goes into the envelope? In other words, I want them to read this text, this slide into the envelope, and then this text to appear. Well, just select that text, go to your animations, do add animation, and select the effect that you want. Maybe you should just do something simple as a fade. Oh, that's a exit. Let's do an entrance because we want it to fade in. So I'm going to choose fade. And you'll notice over here it adds it to the animation pane, but it's still requiring a click by the user. But nothing in here says to click. So let's just automatically tell it to do it after the previous one. So what will happen is this. User reads, photo goes into the envelope, and the text fades up. It's that easy. And keep in mind, all we're doing is simply using PowerPoint. Animations you've probably used before, but you're just using it in a different way. So the last thing we want to do on this particular slide is we want to go ahead and adjust this hyperlink. It says return to interviews to ID the murderer. In other words, you didn't quite find the person. You need to go back and research a little bit more. So we're simply highlight the text and we're going to insert hyperlink. And again, we're just simply going to choose the appropriate slide. This one's titled interviews. So hit OK. And it's that easy, folks. Nothing really complicated at all. And the only other one that we wanted to do, we'll do one more. Let's do that with Booth, just as kind of a recap. We're going to do the exact same thing that we did with Lewis Powell's photo, but this time we're going to do it with Booth's. So same thing, select Booth's photo, Animations tab, Add Animation, come down to Custom Path, draw you a custom path that goes into the envelope, double click it to end the path. With it still selected, we're going to click Add Animation because we're adding to this one, and we're going to do a fade or a disappear at the end. Click Disappear. You can choose another one if you like. And again, notice over here we have 2 clicks. This basically says it's waiting on the user to do something, to click something before these take place. Well, we don't want that. We just want them to happen automatically. So I'm going to change number 2. I'm going to change it to start after the first animation. And this first animation, I'm going to change that to start after previous. Because now, once the user goes to this slide, remember that transition counts as an animation. So now it will start the moment he comes onto the slide. And I'm going to go ahead and delay it by 2 seconds. So we'll play. So the user comes to the slide, reads up at the top, then the animation takes place and disappears. And you know what? Let's go ahead and have this text fade in too. So let's select the text, add animation. We want this one to fade in. And I want this to happen right after the image disappears. Let's play through it just to test it. 1, 2, photo goes in, disappears, text fades up. Oh, but look, it sits on top of this other photo. So what do we do with these photos? What do we do with the other photos if they've already chosen this one? Well, since they chose the right person, we don't need these anymore. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select each one of these photos. And I'm going to go to Add Animation. And I want these to fly out of there. I'm going to choose Fly Out. And they're already going down. If I wanted to go a different direction, I could always click right here, Effect Options, and change the direction of them. But I like the going down, so that's fine. So those are going to fade to the bottom. Oh, but notice right here again, it's still waiting for the user to click on this. You know what? And the reason I don't want the user just clicking, because there's nothing inside the text that tells them to do so. So I want it to feel like it's just something naturally that's just happening. So I'm going to select number 1, the one that has the mouse click to it, and I'm going to select it to be start after the previous. And notice it automatically did it for all the ones underneath it. So now when we play through, picture goes up into the envelope, text fades in, and then the photos disappear. Maybe I should have the photos disappear before the text fades in, because it looked like the text faded on top of that. So let's go and select the text box in our animation pane, and I'm just sliding it down to the very bottom. So now let's play through and see what it looks like. Picture goes up, into the envelope, disappears. Awesome. That's what I was looking for. That's what we wanted. And so it looks like the last thing that we need to do is simply connect these hyperlinks. So I'm going to go and highlight this text. This one looks like it's going back to the interviews. So I've selected the text, going to Insert. I'm going to select Hyperlink, select the interviews, because that's where it's going to. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to highlight the second text, which basically says, oops, my bad. The second one is the interviews. So let's just go and do that one. I should probably read it before I hyperlink it and hit OK. So what about this first one, though? We've already put a hyperlink on it. Do we have to delete the text? Not at all. Highlight your text, right-click on it, and choose Edit Hyperlink. And now tell it where you want it to go. And it looks like this one is going on to the crime scene. So I'm going to select the crime scene and hit OK. And that's it. And so basically all the other slides that I've created follow that exact same pattern. And it's that easy to create a very interactive branching story. So let's go to the beginning, and let me just show you as we end this session. So slideshow from the beginning. Click on the envelope. Read all the text. Click the envelope to see the list of interviewees. We'll do that. Let's choose ones that we haven't done. For example, Joseph Stewart. We could read his encounter. We can go back to the interviews, read some more. Let's go to Major Rathburn. We can read his encounter, go back to, we'll do one more. We'll do Harry Hawk, who is an actor. And we'll read his encounter. And based upon this, we're like, you know what, I've got enough information. I want to report to Stanton. So let's go report to Stanton. Say, sir, I know the murderer's name. Let's click on that one. So here, we click to see the names. So again, same concept. I just simply put an animation to the text when it flies in. And you'll notice that each one of these are hyperlinks. So if we choose the incorrect hyperlink, David Harold, you picked Harold's name, moving into the envelope. Hey, look, automatically happens. Text fades in. We didn't get the right one. So we're going to go back to the interviews. We're going to do a little bit more research, and that's when we find out, you know what? Hey, this guy was actually John Wilkes Booth. So once we have that information, we'll report back to Stanton. I know the murderer's name. He gives you another option, and this time you click on John Wilkes Booth. You pick John Wilkes Booth name and move it into the envelope. Oh, look, automatically does it. Fantastic work. Good. So now we can keep going on. So now this time, let's see, what's he asking for? We need you to find the culprit. Would you be able to pick out a photo of him? We're going to choose, yes, sir. I've got a pretty good idea of what he looks like based on those interviews. Click here to see the photos. This is the section that we just created or fixed. And we're going to go and choose the right photo just for sake of time. You pick the photo on the far right. It's going to move in there. Disappears. Pictures fade out. Text fades in. Awesome. We did a great job. And at this point, we have an option to go back to interview more witnesses by returning back to the interview list or continuing on with this into the crime scene. So let's go and pick on that. So now we're at the crime scene. And what we have here is a depiction, and we simply have to choose the right photos. And again, if you remember the flowchart, if we choose 3 of these, we'll take you back to the interview list. and only one of them will move you to the end. Well, I happen to know that it's this one, so I'm going to click on this one. Other ones simply slide off, again, just using an animation. But notice how it automatically does it when I go to the new slide. That way it feels like this thing is moving. I'm not having to simply click through a bunch of different things. So nice work, Detective, and it says here to send a final message to the Vice President. And what I did for this one is I created a hyperlink that's going to launch my email program. Well, how do you do that? Well, I'm going to hit escape real quick. Let me show you that now. We'll finish it out that way. Let's go back. Oh, here we are. All right, so here's my text. It's highlighted. So I'm going to remove the hyperlink, and we'll start it from scratch. So I'm going to highlight the text, do insert, and then do hyperlink. And then you'll notice my options here. I can send it to an existing file. I can send it to a web page. Place in this document is all that we've been using. I can actually create a new document or the email address. So I'm going to select the email address, and here I could type in my email, so when the student gets to this slide, they could send me a report about what actually happened. And the subject will read, Lincoln's murder. So now when the user clicks on it, it'll automatically open up their email program, which they can send me an email describing the entire report that took place. Here's who did it, here's what he looked like, and here's what happened. And that way I, as the instructor, would know. So just a different way of introducing material to your students. Instead of just having them read about Lincoln's murder, give them a little scenario. Make them think through it. Make them go back to the text. The purpose of this one was to have them go back and look over the text over and over again to see if from the facts they could figure out what happened. Most folks know who killed Lincoln, but they don't necessarily know exactly what happened inside the box. And so you can help create these type of interactive scenarios to make your content just a bit more engaging. And now that we have it done, the question is, how do we get it to students? Well, come up here and click on File, and you want to choose Save As. Now when the window pops up, two things I want you to think about. Number one is the file name and the type how you save it. For the file name, you want to make sure, especially if this is going to be delivered via the internet, you want to make sure to not have any spaces in the name. It can cause some issues with the file. So how do you get around that? Well, instead of spaces, you can use, for example, hyphens. That's what I've used here. You can also use underscore, or if you wanted to, you could do what's called, I think it's called camel capping. It's basically where you take the first letter of every other word and capitalize it. But either way, just make sure you don't have any spaces in the name. Now when it comes to save as type, I recommend that you save it as a PowerPoint show. And what's nice about this is that whenever the student downloads the file, basically all they have to do is double click it and it will automatically open up in slideshow view. Kind of cool. So anyway, so there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you can find some ways of using this. And if you'd like to do something really creative but you're not too sure how, definitely give me a call because I would love to help out with one of these types of projects. So if there's anything else I can do for you, just let me know.